What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into another preview and prediction special. Today, we're going to be looking at the 2025 Men's Basketball Big 12 Conference Tournament, which will be tipping off on Tuesday, March 11th in T-Mobile Center in Kansas City, Missouri. I always look forward to the Big 12. It's absolutely loaded this year with a lot of teams that can make a deep run in the March Madness tournament. So before we get into our preview and predictions, let's go ahead and run through the top four seeds and who ultimately earned a double bye in this tournament. So the number one seed, who went 19-1 in the Big 12 in the regular season, is the Houston Cougars, and the Houston Cougars are definitely a team to look at. They're going to be the number one seed, one of them a number one seed in the NCAA tournament. This is definitely a team that can not only make it to the Final Four, but win a national championship and finally break through. This has been a team that has made it to the Final Four in the past, but hasn't broke through yet and won a national championship. So maybe this is a year for Houston after a dominant regular season by the Cougars. The number two seed is Texas Tech. Texas Tech, definitely a team to look out for, not only in this conference tournament, but as well as the big dance. The number three seed is Arizona. Arizona has been a roller coaster ride this season. They definitely have the talent to make a deep run in this tournament. So we will see how far I have the Arizona Wildcats going. And finally, the number four seed in this tournament is BYU. And what a story BYU has been this season. They started out this season being on the bubble and potentially not even projected to make it to the tournament, but they are definitely one of the hottest teams in the country. Some big wins more recently on the road in Hilton Coliseum against Iowa State, and they beat Utah this past week and to close out a terrific season for BYU. So we'll see if BYU can continue their magic in this Big 12 tournament and ultimately when it matters in the field of 68. So let's go ahead and start these conference tournament preview and predictions with the first round, starting with the first game that will be tipping off at 11:30 a.m. on Tuesday, which features the number 13 seed Cincinnati and number 12 seed Oklahoma State. I expect this to be a close back and forth game, but let's go with the number 13 seed Cincinnati against Oklahoma State. So we have a first little upset happening in this tournament with Cincinnati moving on and facing off against the number 5 seed Iowa State, which is definitely going to be a tough matchup. Iowa State is definitely starting to turn the corner, get healthier as the season ends. So Iowa State is definitely a team to watch, not only in this tournament, but as well once we get into next week when the next tournament tips off. And then number 16 seed Colorado faces off against number 9 seed TCU. I expect TCU to have no trouble in this one. Colorado definitely one of the worst teams in the Big 12 this season. So give me the Horned Frogs to move on for yet another day and face off against the 8 seed West Virginia. Number 15 seed Arizona State, number 10 seed Kansas State. And the games I watch Arizona State mainly when I watch them against Arizona, they look like one of the best teams in this tournament, putting up over 100 points. Kansas State was a preseason favorite to be a top 4 seed and ultimately make it to the NCAA tournament. But that looks like it's not going to be the case unless Kansas State makes a big run here. But I will have Kansas State moving on and facing the number 7 seed Baylor. And let's move on to the next matchup, number 14 UCF versus number 11 seed Utah. And let's go with another upset here. Let's go with UCF over Utah. Utah is a scrappy team. I just think that there's going to be some upsets in this first round. So give me UCF moving on to the second round of this tournament. So let's move on now to that second round, which features the first matchup on March 12th, kicking off the day, which features number 13 seed Cincinnati versus number 5 seed Iowa State. I think that Iowa State should have no trouble in this matchup. Give me Iowa State to move on and look for a rematch against BYU in the quarterfinals of this tournament. Number 9 seed TCU versus number 8 seed West Virginia. The last time I looked at the bracketology, West Virginia was safely in the field as a number 10 seed. TCU on the outside looking in. But I'm actually going to go with TCU pulling off this 9/8 upset over West Virginia. So give you a little upset happening there in the second round. Then we have Kansas State, Baylor. I think that this would be another terrific basketball game in the second round of this tournament. But I am going to go with Baylor. Baylor, not the season that they hoped for. This was a preseason top 10 team in the AP poll, and they just haven't had the season that they hoped for. They're currently on the bubble right now. They had 13 losses overall. So Baylor needing not only one win, maybe 2 wins to really feel safe about their really hopes of making it to the NCAA tournament. But I think that if Baylor survives and advances to play another day. Let's move on now to the 14 versus 6 seed with UCF, the 14 6 seed being Kansas. Kansas as well. They were the preseason #1 team, one of the favorites to win this Big 12 tournament and ultimately be in the Houston spot where they are. But not the season that Bill's self squad had in mind. There is a lot of talent on this team still, so I would definitely not doubt Kansas making a deep run in this tournament. And that's exactly what I'm going to be having with Kansas beating the number 14 seed UCF. Little nice Cinderella story there by UCF, but I have it ending with Kansas beating them. So let's move on now to the quarterfinal round with number 5 seed Iowa State, number 4 seed BYU. And I hope that we get this rematch because if you watch the game a couple of days ago in Hilton Coliseum, this was a double overtime win of BYU. It was a back and forth game. And if you watch that game, BYU was actually up at 21 at one point, though I am going to go with Iowa State. I just think that nothing against BYU. I think that Iowa State is looking for a little bit of revenge. They honestly didn't play that well in that game. They got some Hilton magic late to get it to overtime, but I expect this one to be another fantastic game. Wouldn't surprise me if BYU wins this one, but I am going to go with Iowa State in the 5 seed. Let's move on now to the second game of the quarterfinals, which features number 9 seed TCU versus number 1 seed Houston. Once again, I just think that Houston too powerful of a team to get out in this early of this tournament. So give me Houston to move on and face off against Iowa State. Moving on down, number 7 seed Baylor and number 2 seed Texas Tech. Now, this is a game that Baylor potentially needs to win depending on how many bid stealers there are happening throughout this week. Number 2, Texas Tech. This is a team that I'm really high on. This is a tough pick for me, but I'm also going to go with the Red Raiders. It wouldn't surprise me if Baylor does pull off this upset, but I am going to go with Texas Tech to move on to the semifinals. So let's move on to number 6 seed Kansas and number 3 seed Arizona. We just saw this matchup happening. It was a very good game. I expect a very good game as well in the nightcap of this tournament. Let's go with a little upset. We'll go with Kansas. Kansas always performs well in this Big 12 tournament, so give me Kansas. Arizona has been a roller coaster ride. I mean, both of these teams have just been up and down this season, but I am going to go with Kansas. They're just something that tells me that they're going to make a run in this tournament. So let's move on now to number 5 seed Iowa State and number 1 seed Houston. These are just two teams that just love to attack on the defensive side of the ball, but I am going to go with Houston, the number 1 seed, to move on there. So all chalk so far as we have the number 1 seed in this tournament moving on to the championship. And then number 2 seed Texas Tech and number 6 seed Kansas. We just saw this one recently. Texas Tech went into the fog and ultimately beat the Jayhawks. And I have that happening again as we have the top 2 seeds advancing on to this tournament. So really no big upsets to keep in mind as we had number 1 seed Houston and number 2 seed Texas Tech. So ultimately, who do I have winning the Big 12 tournament? I know it's not all fun and dandy, but I just think that Houston is just the best team in this tournament, and they're going to prove it throughout this week leading up to the Big 12 championship. So we have Houston taking down number 2 seed Texas Tech. Let me know who you have making it to the championship and ultimately taking the crown in the Big 12 conference tournament. So I appreciate everybody for tuning into today's video, and I will catch y'all next time. So long for now.